Welcome to another episode, all. Throughout this episode, I'm going to be talking about a fake cure to do with what are called herbal remedies, or sometimes called herbal medicines, by Dr. Akuza and Dr. Oyalo. Let's get started. If you first allow me to introduce who Dr. Akuza is. He says, I'm herbal Dr. Akuza from West Africa. I make herbs for all kind of virus and diseases. My herbs is 100% active and guaranteed with no side effects. A lot of people have used my herbs across the world. Herbal remedy is the best. Be free from that virus or diseases permanently with the use of my herbs, Dr. Akuza Oyalo. End of quote. So apparently he's in West Africa, this doctor who's offering out herbs, and Dr. Oyalo, he doesn't seem to introduce himself online, but apparently he's got his own YouTube videos. So these two seem to offer out the same herbs. But something I'd like you to keep in mind is where he said, my herbs. If we think to ourselves for a moment, you and I could go to the same shop and we could buy a packet of herbs, the same kind of herbs, and then if we went home, whose herbs is it? Is it, what makes it my herbs? Or why exactly? So obviously there's something different about these herbs which he has to offer to the people who purchase them from him. First he says, don't let the medical system deceive you. So first of all, the medical model is not trying to deceive you. There may be errors inside of the medical model, such as I do agree there are some errors, which is all down to the fallacy of normality. Because a lot of what they claim to be broken or claim to be disabled is basically anything they consider abnormal. And I disagree with the concept of normalcy and abnormality. So that's where I see the errors in the medical model. But when it comes to medicines, there is one big money scam called Big Pharma. And this Big Pharma, that's the only money scam that they're doing concerning medicines. So don't just let them off the hook. So Dr. Akuza does have a point. Right, so what are herbal medicines first of all? Herbal medicines are those with active ingredients made from plant parts, such as leaves, roots of flowers, but being natural doesn't necessarily mean they're safe for you to take. Just like conventional medicines, herbal medicines will have an effect on the body and can be potentially harmful if not used correctly. They should therefore be used with the same care and respect as conventional medicines. If you're consulting your doctor or pharmacist about health matters or are about to undergo surgery, always tell them about any herbal medicines you're taking. That is what the NHS has to say, the National Health Services, concerning what is a herbal medicine. And when I point out, just because something's natural, but doesn't make it safe, we could use as an example, say, alcohol and tobacco. Both of them are natural substances, but we now know from discoveries which have been made that if we consume alcohol, it can cause liver damage, and if we consume tobacco, it can cause lung cancer. So we know that sometimes herbal medicines can cause damage and not necessarily what's good. Because originally, in the military, alcohol and tobacco were both used for healing. So we've got the good side of them if they're used correctly, but if used incorrectly, such as consuming them, we see that it has a very negative effect. So don't take natural things for granted, I would advise you. And then the NHS warns us about some issues which I shall read out to you. They may cause problems if you're taking other medicines. They could make the other medicines less effective or cause the other medicine to trigger unexpected side effects. You may experience a bad reaction or side effects after taking a herbal medicine. Not all herbal medicines are regulated. Remedies specially prepared for individuals don't need a license, and those manufactured outside the UK, or outside of your country if you don't live in the UK, may not be subject to regulation. Evidence for the effectiveness of herbal medicines is generally very limited. Although some people find them helpful, in many cases their use tends to be based on traditional use rather than scientific research. I'd like to point a few things out in there. In my experience concerning medicines, when I've consumed certain medicines together at the same time, it has had some negative effects on me. As an example, when I consumed my epilepsy medication at the same time with a medication called melatonin for sleeping difficulties, it was making me have some real strange nightmares and the big strong feeling of deja vu that I was going to trigger an epileptic seizure. So my epilepsy specialist told me to separate them, take the melatonin separate from all my epilepsy medication. I did so, as they instructed me, and that did solve that. I stopped having all these strange nightmares in the morning, stopped feeling like having the seizures. So I can say from my own experience that consuming multiple medicines, whether it's herbal medicine or big pharma, it can have negative effects on us as well. So I will take that part seriously, and so on. Right, and then where it says where there's not much evidence on it, personally, I would actually like it if there were actually more herbal medicines. I would like it, but there's not evidence behind the herbal medicines which are being offered because of where I mentioned big pharma being a big money scam. All the money, the funding and so on, goes towards big pharma. It doesn't get put towards the researchers who actually want to research herbal remedies, who actually want to find evidence that they can be effective. As I'll talk more about that when I talk about the genetics later in the episode. But yes, I would rather have things like this herbal medicine, from what I've read from reviews, than the behavioural therapies such as applied behaviour analysis. And I would like parents to have more options, more interventions which they can choose from. Because what's good for one person may be bad for another. So it'd be good if there were more options for parents to decide which one is best for their child. Because those of us who are neurodiversity advocates, we don't claim that disabled people shouldn't have any help or support or treatment. What we are against is we are against specifically a cure. We are not against treatments. For example, I haven't come across any neurodiversity advocate who claims that we should just keep letting people have epileptic seizures. So when it comes to the anxiety, I haven't come across anyone who goes saying, we should just let them keep having anxiety. So neurodiversity advocates are not against help and support for disabled people. They're just against eradicating our differences from the world. I'll bring more evidence into this of why we shouldn't do that when we get a bit later on. Right, so some of the issues which because there is certain groups of people that shouldn't consume these herbal medicines. For example, they say people taking other medicines, including hormonal contraceptives, such as the combined pill. The second, people with serious health conditions, such as liver or kidney damage. Third, people who are going to have surgery. Fourth, pregnant or breastfeeding women. Fifth, the elderly. Sixth, children. As with all medicines, herbal medicine should be kept out of the sight and reach of children. And they advise, speak to your doctor or pharmacist for advice before trying a herbal medicine if you fall into one of these groups. So I don't see any problem with that. So if you are going to consume herbal medicines, because the medical system doesn't claim there's anything wrong with them, it's just providing us advice of how to consume them safely. So I would agree there that speak to your doctor or pharmacist if you wish to try any of these herbal remedies that are going around being said to be cures of autism. Right, so now I'm going to be switching on to the genes and so on now. So that's all that the NHS had to say. Right, but when it comes to genes and so on, these herbal remedies actually do not cure. They don't cure the autism, because we know that autism is associated with mutations and is a primarily genetic condition, with the theory of the cause being a combination of genetic and environmental factors. So to go claiming that they have cured it while making no difference to the changes, no changes to the individual's genes, it makes things very illegitimate, such as I don't think these doctors are actually legitimate doctors from what they have to say. Because if they're going to claim that they have cured autism, that basically means that they're claiming they have disabled the process called mutagenesis, they have disabled the process called neuroplasticity, that they have disabled an individual to change, that they have disabled epigenetics, that they have rearranged and reorganized all the nucleotides and DNA that's inside of you. They've rearranged it all with just herbs. Now, I can say with certainty that is not true. Herbs can't go making all those changes, and they cannot disable those things. So if you stop epigenetics, as these people are claiming, that means you will not have the ability to adapt to another environment from one to another. You won't be able to adapt to alternative environments. You won't be able to come to things like going to sleep. So they're claiming, oh, you're not able to sleep anymore once we cure you. So that seems so illegitimate what these people are saying. So I'm just going to talk a bit about epigenetics now. Basically, when we consume substances, it can activate and deactivate particular genes. It's our genetics and so on that do have some control behind what are called symptoms of autism, such as things like the hypersensitivity, where we don't actually know what that really is, because that's actually sensory processing disorder. It's not autism. But if you think to yourself, autistic kids can be in the same environment, but only at specific times do they get oversensitive or undersensitive. That's because either something happens in the environment, or they can consume something that deactivates or activates the genes. So in this case, with sensory issues, they consume it, and that activates a gene, and it alters the behaviour, alters the way of thinking. It can make numerous alterations to the way a person behaves. Like the consumption of alcohol, for example, we find that deactivates some genes, activates others, and we describe them as people who are drunk. And they can't seem to think with clarity when they're drunk, that they'll behave in ways that they don't usually behave in. So consuming things like this, activating, deactivating genes, changes the way a person behaves. And when I look at all the reviews of people who say, oh, it's cured my child's autism, but basically they're talking it's changed my child's behaviour. So these doctors are claiming that behaviour modification is a cure. But behaviour modification is not a cure, that's applied behaviour analysis. It's manipulation. But we know that consuming herbs and so on, that's not the case. So they are on there about curing autism. Now I'm going to go a bit further into the genetics now, such as through history, such as these disabilities have existed for hundreds of thousands of years. They have. So why have they only been seen as disabilities for less than 2 centuries? For such a limited time out of how long they've been. Doesn't something seem suspicious about that? There's the man called Francis Galton who popularised the racist eugenics in the 19th century, and that is when the concept of normality was made. Ever since normality was made by Francis Galton, that's when all these disabilities that we call now, disorders and so on, that's when apparently these became seen as disorders. Anything that does not match what he thought to be supreme. Now I'm just going to read something from a book called The Power of Neurodiversity by PhD Thomas Armstrong. So if I just find the other part. But basically, he points out that there are no mutants inside of it. So I'm going to quote out someone called Matt Ridley, who was a science writer. I quote, "The Human Genome Project is founded upon a fallacy. There is no such thing as the human genome. Neither in space nor in time can such a definite object be defined. At hundreds of different loci, scattered throughout the 23 chromosomes, there are genes that differ from person to person. Nobody can say that blood group A is normal and O, B and AB are abnormal. So when the Human Genome Project publishes the sequence of a typical human being, what will it publish for the ABO gene on chromosome 9? The project's declared aim is to publish the average or consensus sequence of 200 different people, but this would miss the point in the case of the ABO gene, because it is a crucial part of its function that it should not be the same in everybody. Variation is an inherent and integral part of the human, or indeed any genome." End of quote. So we found there that there actually is no normal human. There's no such thing. And Adolf Quetelet, the one who came up with the average man, by his own admission, he said that the average man is the impossible man. That there is no such thing. So where so many scientists claim that you've got to be on the average to be healthy, that is a fallacy in and of itself. When they make the law that if you deviate from the average, there's something wrong with you, is what we go claiming. But that's a fallacy altogether. Let's say for a moment we were talking about the height. You could say someone's just 1 meter tall, someone's 2, 3, and 4. That'll add up to 10, but then divided by 4, you get 2.5. So none of the 4 of them are on the average. None of them are 2.5, are they? So since none of them are at 2.5, none of them were on the average to begin with. So if they're not on the average to begin with, how can they deviate from the average? It means that no one has deviated from the average, including those of us defined as disabled. So now if you just allow me to get another book to read out to you, one called The Darwin Effect. This one's got lots of records inside of it. I'm just going to read some out to you. I quote, "Among the large amount of research that discredited some of the eugenics ideas, probably the foremost was the realization that resulted from the ongoing research into genetics that the relationship between the genotype and the phenotype was far more complex than previously imagined. Much of this research was on so-called simple creatures such as the fruit fly. In addition, it was realized that humans are produced from around 23,000 genes, and that it was extremely difficult to determine if any one gene is superior to another. As many eugenicists taught for decades, we now realize most traits are produced by a set of genes. At best, one could try to make judgments relative to the superiority of one specific trait compared to another trait. This is most easily achieved in the case of a mutation. A person who had a mutation that caused hemophilia could be considered inferior compared to the person who had a normal factor VIII gene. This method considers only one gene, and a person without the genetic defect for hemophilia will be genetically inferior in some other way, because mutations or genes that produce inferior traits exist in all humans. A person may have a mutation for baldness, for example, and become bald later in life. Even a person who has certain traits, such as below average intellect, may in some other way be genetically superior, a determination that we cannot make until all of the estimated 23,000 genes are mapped and compared to the entire population. And even then, comparative judgments cannot be made except on very simplistic grounds, such as counting the total number of genes judged inferior and superior. Even this approach falls short, because certain single genes can cause far more problems than others, and conversely, can confer on the person more advantages than most other genes, such as genes that result in the production of above average levels of glutathione transferase. This trait would reduce the likelihood of disease from cancer to heart disease to strokes. It then would be necessary to rate each individual gene and gene interaction, something that so far has not been done. In addition, many so-called inferior genes are actually mutations that were caused somewhere in the human genetic past and were subsequently passed on to the victim's offspring. Of the identified diseases, over 5,000 are a result of heritable mutations, and none of these 5,000 existed in our past before the mutation causing it was introduced into the human gene pool. As these mutations accumulate, a deterioration of the genome called devolution results, an event that is the opposite of the eugenics goal of trying to create the most flawless race and then limit reproduction to members of this race. This goal is flawed because the accumulation of mutations tends to result in all races becoming less perfect. And in this case, where the claim that mutations are what are bad, makes something wrong with us, that's rather invalidated by the point that all humans, all of us, have mutations, and the mutations are brought into it because it's all dependent on our environment, and as we've changed the environment and changed the social settings. So I'm just going to read another part out from the same book. Something which is a problem going on today where there's a debate. I quote, "As J.B.S. Haldane proclaimed in 1932, a society of men that was uniformly perfect would still produce an imperfect society. The enormous genetic variety among humans, and among plants and animals as well, was important because it will always allow some individuals to survive different environmental changes. When the Pilgrims came over to America, a few had the genetic predispositions that enabled them to survive the alien environment in America with its foreign germs and new living requirements. Those that survived may not have been the strongest in the land from which they came, but were stronger in the new environment. If all those that came over were genetically identical, none of them would have survived." End of quote. So, in this case, what they have to say is that whichever genes they saw as the normal genes apparently are the best ones and superior, but because we've all got mutations, that would mean that they would have to eliminate more people, which reduces how many humans can be born. So this whole idea that some mutations are bad, mutations are good, and so on, the fact that good, bad, desirable, and so on are all opinions and points of view, but science is not to be based on opinions and points of view. So we're already seeing flaw mistakes here and violation of science. So these are not actually valid scientific claims. What we have seen throughout time is that when you put a living organism into an environment that suits its needs, more neural circuits in the brain connect. So actually, when we put an organism in an environment that doesn't suit its needs, it cuts all that stuff off and prevents development. So really, it's not actually the genes themselves that are the fault behind this. It's not the development, it's all the social settings. And those who were in those records of the Eugenics, there's many critics of sociobiology, pointing out that sociobiology is very related and parallel to the racist eugenics movement. So why are the two so related and parallel? It's because both of them have a genetic basis. I believe that social behaviour is based on genetics, and social is also associated with the concept of normal. So whatever normal behaviour is, they claim that's the right way. So anything which they see as not normal, they see it as bad. And since they think it's dependent on genetics, they want to eliminate those genes, even though our species requires those genes, and so on. So really, the herbal remedies, all these herbs and so on, don't actually cure the autism whatsoever. They just adapt and alter, activate and deactivate certain genes. They do. Such as where I said it's about all the social settings, I'm going to read something by Evelyn Fox Keller called have a debate between the nature and nurture. So if you just allow me to go to the page. I quote, the question lingers, however, of how we are to respond to those for whom, despite all these difficulties, questions of difference still remain pressing. But I fear depends on why such questions seem so pressing. On the social and economic issues that would be at stake if we could meaningfully answer these questions, and on the particular political, economic, and social values we hold dear. In other words, it depends on politics. And I would say that's entirely the case. It is dependent upon politics. Such as, say, if we think of the education system, allow me to give an example. We only seem to teach specific subjects in the education system, but there's lots of subjects that are not included. But what we come to say is, when we look at neurodivergent people, who we currently call in the neurodiversity movement, such as people with Down syndrome, autism, ADHD, if that's actually a legitimate disorder, as there are some scientists still think it's not legitimate, and so on. They tend to be better and superior at alternative things. So as the book I read, The Darwin Effect, it says that everyone's got inferior and superior genes. So many of the things among the Eugenics movement, those of us who are autistic, we tend to have an enhancement on all things. Nearly everything. If you imagine a continuum, most people are somewhere near the centre of the continuum concerning abilities. Abilities, modes, behaviour, and sociability, and so on. But autistic people tend to be right near the two extremes, near one of the two ends. So they're either superior at something or they are inferior at it. For example, if we go autistic people, when it comes to their physical senses, they're either over, near the top somewhere, or they're right down near the bottom. When it comes to their anxiety, they're either right near the bottom again, or they're right near the top. So we found that they tend not to be near the middle. So if we included all subjects in the education system, we would find that there's so many things that the disabled people would be extremely good at, that non-disabled people are not good at. But then if we include inside of it the ones that are not, the ones which are in it, non-disabled people are good at them, more superior, better than disabled, and they've kicked out, excluded all the abilities that disabled people are good at. So imagine we brought all the systems into it, all the subjects, of the human ability spectrum. What we'd have would say an equilibrium of ability and disability, of talent and not being talented. So by choosing those subjects, designing the school system, designing education, it's designed to suit a specific group, which makes it not suitable for other groups. So it's not the genetics or anything that cause these difficulties, it's actually the social settings of it. It's nothing to do with these themselves. So from the beginning, there's actually nothing to cure. To begin with, it's not the autism that needs to be cured, and we don't even know what autism is still. For example, we can compare it to epilepsy. Epilepsy is like a continuum as well, like a spectrum, because there's numerous types of epilepsy, and their epileptic seizures are different, The levels of severity are different, and that's the way we describe the autism spectrum. So why don't we call epilepsy a spectrum disorder? You know, so why don't we apply the same principle? It's because we actually know what epilepsy is. We see the common denominator. The common denominator is regardless of what type of seizure, what form of epilepsy they've got, they all have epileptic seizures. So we know the common denominator, and that's why we just call it epilepsy and not epilepsy spectrum disorder. So they've gone and called autism a spectrum disorder because they don't know any common denominator. So how can they cure something that they don't even know what it is? We still don't know what autism is. So how can they cure it? Precisely, they can't cure it because we don't even know what it is. But I can sense that autism makes me who I am. So when people say we want to cure autism, they are actually going and saying, oh, let's get rid of them, let's eliminate them from the earth. We don't want these people to exist. But you're actually saying we don't deserve life. I'm just going to read something out by someone around the time of the Eugenics movement who was absolutely against it at the time. Right, so I quote, Mr. Wells' point was this, that we cannot be certain about the inheritance of health, because health is not a quality. It is not a thing like darkness in the hair or length in the limbs. It is a relation, a balance. You have a tall, strong man, but his very strength depends on his not being too tall for his strength. You catch a healthy, full-blooded fellow, but his very health depends on his being not too full of blood. A heart that is strong for a dwarf will be weak for a giant. A nervous system that would kill a man with a trace of a certain illness will sustain him to 90 if he has no trace of that illness. Nay, the same nervous system might kill him if he had an excess of some other comparatively healthy thing. Seeing, therefore, that there are apparently healthy people of all types, it is obvious that if you make two of them, you may even then produce a discord out of two inconsistent harmonies. It is obvious that you can no more be certain of a good offspring than you can be certain of a good tune if you play two fine airs at once on the same piano. You can be even less certain of it in the more delicate case of beauty, of which the eugenicists talk a great deal. Marry two handsome people whose noses tend to the aquiline, and their baby may be a goblin, with a nose like an enormous parrot's. Indeed, I actually know a case of this kind. The eugenicist has to settle, not the result of fixing one steady fin to a second steady fin, but that will happen when one topping and dizzy equilibrium crashes into another. End of quote. So where it says that, there's all kinds of healthy people, this also means there's all kinds of unhealthy people. So allow me to talk about the non-disabled people. Allow me to describe you, those of you who are not disabled, and we'll take a look at it. For example, the small talk. I can reword that and go say things like, non-autistic people love to talk about boring things. They do not like to talk about interesting things. They talk about something boring and they expect you to pay attention. That sounds like an absolute deficit. Autistic people are fixated and do what they enjoy in order to enjoy life. But non-autistic people They pretend that they are interested in something they are not interested in order to socialise with people. So they claim they want to enjoy life, and they think they can enjoy life by doing what they're not interested in. That sounds like another deficit to me. Non-autistic people seem to greatly struggle to communicate with autistic people. So that must mean that non-autistic people have autistic communication deficits. Where non-autistic people are interested in lots of things. They like to do lots of activities. But autistic people, they just do what they're interested in, and that gives them enough time to get so good at it that they become so talented at what it is they choose to do. Non-autistic people are so susceptible to peer pressure. They don't seem able to stand against their friends very easily. They seem to find that so difficult. But autistic people, they seem absolutely fine. They don't go doing something just because the majority's doing it. They're not so susceptible to compliance. So, like we're non-autistic people, maybe I'm on a group of friends, say about 10, if 2 of those friends decided and wanted to go shoplifting, all the other non-autistic people would conform due to the obsession with conformity and steal, even if you disagree with it. So, again, that sounds like a great deficit. Oh, non-autistic people always do things the way they've always done them. Do things the way you've always done them, you'll only get what you've already got. You'll never get anything new. So, non-autistic people struggle to go beyond the lines. So, that sounds like another deficit. They don't want to be creative. They've got a great lack of creativity. But dyslexics, people with dyslexia, they're extremely creative. Most of the greatest entrepreneurs are dyslexic. They've got great ideas by being outside the box. So all these disabled people, they'll have some superior genes as well as inferior genes. Non-autistic people, non-disabled, you've got these superior ones, but you're inferior at the ones on the outside of these lines that you've set. So really, isn't everyone disabled? Everyone. Since there's things you struggle with that we don't, and there's things we struggle with that you don't. So really, it's all a matter of making everything evolve around the majority and not actually following nature's course. The reason these mutations are sustained is because this is what sustains genetic stability. By sustaining the genetic stability by these mutations, it enhances our adaptability to the environment and increases the pace of evolution. And that's what helps us survive, what helps our species survive. It does. So, altogether really, all these herbal remedies don't cure autism, they just influence and affect a person's behaviour. It's just a change of behaviour. It's not a cure to autism. For example, people don't see me as autistic because they judge me by my behaviour. But just by looking at my behaviour, apparently you were claiming that I'm cured. That I'm cured because I don't do all that very active stimming. I have the ability to speak. I'm not so introverted. So you would say that I'm cured of autism, but I haven't taken any kind of cure. So simply, it's just as I've developed, as I've aged, epigenetics have occurred, which has influenced my behaviour, which has just affected my development. It had nothing to do with any kind of cure. But you all can claim that I'm cured compared to what I originally were when I was a child. So I can assure you it's simply just epigenetics by how they activate and deactivate your child's genes if you've got an autistic child. I strongly advise you, don't go using the term cure autism. You can say that, say if you've used these herbs, say that, oh, these herbs seem to have really helped my child. They've really helped my child. But don't go saying it's cured your child of autism. Because first of all, that's a lie. And second of all, it is very offensive to autistic people. The majority of them anyway. They are very offended when you say, we're going to cure autism. You are suggesting that we perform genocide, which is plain evil, which means you're evil. They're suggesting we should do something evil, that we should do genocide on people. So, now, these two doctors, Dr. Oyalo and Dr. Akuza, they don't seem to be legitimate doctors. They've got no idea what autism is. They don't seem to know about epigenetics. They don't seem to know about the behaviours are due to activating and deactivating genes. So, I found it very suspicious, these. And one of the warnings that the NHS gives is that those who sell these genes and so on, who go selling their own herbs, they might include things that are actually illegal, actually include illegal substances in their herbs. And if we go back to what he said at the beginning, those who consume my herbs. So to make it his herbs, that means there's something different about his. So what if the NHS is right? And what if this is one example of someone who's actually put dangerous, illegal, harmful substances into his herbs? Into what so many people are saying is a cure to autism. He said that his herbs are the best. That herbs are the best way. He claims they've got no negative side effects. But that's a lie. What we have seen is that through herbal medicines, they actually reduce a person's lifespan. But when I spoke about Patrick Nemechek and where he was using these kind of herbal remedies with his HIV patients, they suddenly and strangely died. Their lifespan was shortened because of what they saw as a cure to HIV. The only kind of thing which is possibly going to be a cure to autism is something called CRISPR, which is often spoken about by someone called Jennifer Doudna. She was rewarded for CRISPR, in 2020, where on this they can do what's called genetic engineering and can actually alter a person's genes. So these things that we call mutations, they can actually trace where exactly inside the human's body that mutation is, and they can remove it, remove the mutation. They could edit the mutation, so they could change it to what they believe it should have been. So they can manipulate genes now. So if there's any cure to autism, since we know it's primarily genetic, biotechnology, CRISPR, that would be the only hope, but due to how much more investigation is needed, it's centuries away. We're not going to be able to do any of this designer babies or anything anytime soon. So people aren't going to be able to design their own babies. But that's what you'll find on the internet when you look at CRISPR. But as I said, CRISPR and Eugenics will be the only way to ever cure anyone of autism, is by manipulating their genes. to activate certain others. So, please, don't go telling people that you can cure autism through herbal remedies. Make sure you warn them about the dangers of herbal remedies, such as if they're on one of the groups that the NHS spoke about. Make sure you warn them to tell their doctors that they are consuming a herbal medicine. So make sure you inform your doctors if you choose to take one of these herbal remedies. And make sure you remember they are not a cure to autism. It's just some other kind of intervention which does not have enough research in, and because there's not enough research in it, that's why it is not recommended by the National Health Services. So hopefully one day we actually will put more money towards scientifically investigating herbal remedies to actually find some scientific evidence so we can actually show that it is safe to consume them for autistic people. And then, yes, it would be brilliant to be able to replace behaviourism. If you found this episode interesting, please click like, hit subscribe, hang around, and I will be talking about another fake cure in a later episode, one which is actually trying to play scams on people. Well, this one isn't necessarily a scam. These herbal remedies ones, this isn't a scam. There's herbal remedies on it, but you've got to be cautious if you want to try these herbal remedies. So please, be careful if you're going to try these herbal medicines. But the NHS does not restrict you from them, so you are welcome to try them if you want to. But make sure you do your own research. This video has been quite long, so if you've made it this far, thank you for listening.